tell me.
What if I told you one day
You will lose your voice
and could no longer speak?
No.
Would you believe me?
How would you feel if I asked you for your opinion?
And then told you your opinion doesn't matter.
Are you serious?
would that make you mad?
angry.
Would it be wrong to shoot an unarmed man?
Are you free?
No,
Are you?
I don't
What
know.
if I told you?
I'm not allowed to love who I want.
That sounds crazy, right?
Insane. What if my sister?
What if my mother?
What if I had to ask permission
To make decisions about my own body. Unbelievable.
You would say what?
That's crazy.
What?
What century are we in?
Did you vote?
Did you vote?
Did you vote?
No?
Gotta be kidding. No?
Wow. Then I'm not talking to you.
Then I'm not talking to you.
Then I'm not talking to you.
You tell me.
You tell me.
You tell me.
Black folk must vote.
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 Excellent. All right, we are good to go. All right, everyone. So my name is Woodson Carpenter, community art strategist at Rise. Rise Chattanooga, for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We are an organization that focuses on arts and culture under the pillars of education, musical performance, and just in general sort of promote art, promote culture, promote experiences that may be overlooked, experiences that and identities of folks that may not have access to resources that other folks may have access to. And as a part of all of that, we want to make sure that we are telling stories of people of color, telling stories of women and their struggles, and also their victories. So as a part of that, today we're going to talk to Ken Smaltz, founder of Black Folks Must Vote, about his work in his communities across the country, and about the importance of voting and civic engagement in general. So Ken, it's good to see you. It's good to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am as well.
Excellent, excellent. So as we get started, kind of introduce you a little bit, but I like to kind of hear how people introduce themselves. So could you tell us a little bit about you? Who you are, what's your background, and then we'll get into Black Folks Must Vote a little bit.
Okay. Well, as you said, my name is Ken Smaltz. I'm originally born and raised in New York.
Okay.
The last 4 years I've been living in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
And for 30 years, I have sold rare coins and precious metals.
Okay.
I started Black Folk Must Vote in 2004 because I was concerned of the lack of contributions or the lack of the civic engagement that I was seeing from African Americans in the polls. So I started Black Folk Must Vote just to see if I could assist or help that effort.
For sure, for sure. So that's I think that's great. I think that's what we're trying to do here, serve our communities and see where is their need, where are their gaps, and then let's do something about it, right? If we have the time and the resources, what can we do? So I think a big part of what you're doing and what you're pushing is this name, right? And I think that's the hook for a lot of people. It's an interesting title. So where did you get Black Folk Must Vote from?
I want to try and make the story short because it is kind of lengthy. In 2004, my aunt, her name is Audrey Smaltz. She is she's been a part of the civil rights, very active in the movement back in the 60s. She actually marched with Martin on Washington. Not only did she march, because a lot of people say they've marched, she was interviewed in a newspaper and her picture and her comments were also given. So yeah, she's been very active. She knew very personally a lot of people from that day. And in her possession, she had a button, and the button had on the face of it, Black Folk Must Vote. It was a little tiny, small white button, pinback they called it at the time. And I thought the button and the slogan, I'm a fan of history, first of all. And I just thought the slogan, I thought the button, I thought everything about it was really interesting. But at the time, she was, she had a fashion group that that used to dress models backstage in New York City. She's an ex-model as well. She was one of the commentators of the Ebony Fashion Fair, and she started a fashion dressing company back in the early 70s.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Called the Ground Crew.
The Ground Crew, okay.
And in 2004, there was election going on, and she, I don't know, wanted to raise some kind of excitement. So she found this button, and she recreated the button. She made several other buttons that looked like it, and she put them on the people who worked for her backstage. And if you know anything about Fashion Week in New York City, it's star-studded.
Right.
You know, everybody's there. So appearing in magazines and in newspapers, and you would see celebrities wearing the button because she gave it to the people who work backstage. Not only did they wear it, they gave it out.
I see.
And in People magazine, the following day, we saw Diddy wearing a Black Folk Must Vote pin at the opening of a store that he had on, I think it was on Madison Avenue.
Gotcha.
Then there was another magazine called W that had, it's a magazine for models and what have you, in fashion. And actually a white model by the name of Anna Karkova.
Okay.
They had a caption of her, and the caption said, Anna Karkova buying a Black Folk Must Vote button backstage at, I don't know, Caroline Herrera, one of the big fashion shows. And, you know, it really started, I started saying to myself, you know, there's something with this slogan. Where did this slogan come from?
Right.
My aunt, you know, she's involved in a lot of different things, and it was of interest to me. So I looked into it, and to make this story shorter, I looked into the person who made the button. I spoke to that person, asked them if they had trademarked the button, if they had any rights to the slogan.
I see.
And at the time, they told me they did, but I got a lawyer, looked into it, and found that the slogan was not trademarked, and I trademarked the slogan. And I did that because I wanted to, maybe not for that election, but for upcoming elections, whether it's local or you know, what have you, midterms, what have you. I wanted to start an initiative to get Blacks to vote. And that's pretty much, you know, where it began.
Okay. No, that's really interesting. I mean, that's interesting to see. You know, you saw that movement kind of happening already, you know, people picking up on it, seem to be interested. So that's like a pretty kind of clear motivation there, you know, looking around, looking at the political context, looking at that connection between like fashion, right? Maybe not the first place your brain would go to when you're thinking about civic engagement, right? Not to say that, you know, the folks in that sector, in that environment can't do plenty of good work attached and, you know, explicitly about civic engagement, but not the first thing your brain might go to. As a real like jumping off point for this, you know, for this organization, for this movement that you're pushing here. So as you've, you know, going back to sort of the idea and forming up the idea at the beginning, have there been, or were there further back, any barriers you face? I know you talked a little bit about getting that trademark, but in terms of sort of solidifying the idea and making this push to you know, get this idea of Black Folk Must Vote, pins. I know you've got other merch coming up.
Well, that began kind of slowly. It was maybe like a month or 2 months before the election.
Okay. And which year was this?
2004.
Okay, 2004.
2004. I think it was John
Right.
Kerry. John
Okay.
Kerry. And I wanted to see if there was something with this slogan. So I didn't have really much time. So we just figured, you know, I made up, I think it was around 300 or 400 shirts.
Okay.
And, you know, once again, my career is selling precious metals and rare coins. It's not, you know, civic engagement, voting initiatives. It just wasn't. It was something new, but it was exciting. I will tell you that. It was exciting. I always like new things.
Right.
So I made up a bunch of shirts. I got 3 friends of mine, and I said, where could we go to sell these shirts, where we could find a lot of Black people in one location?
Right.
And it just so happens that Howard Homecoming was coming up.
That's perfect. That answers the question right there.
That answered our question. But, you know, we didn't register, and, you know, because they have vendors there, and we didn't have tables and what have you. But we just said, we're going to wing it. We're just going to roll to D.C. and see what happens. And we get to D.C., you know, we're on where the parade route is, and tables are all set up, and we're trying to sell these shirts out of bags, you know, little knapsacks and what have you. As soon as we start to take a shirt out to show it to some people, police came over to us and said, what do you got there? And we said, we have some shirts. They said, are you registered? I said, no, we're not. They said, listen, if we catch you, if you don't have a table to sell these shirts, we're going to have to confiscate everything. So it was a mad dash to try to find a table or someone who would share our table.
Right.
And we found a table. A guy was leaving who was selling cell phone covers at the time.
Got you.
And he had 2 tables and perfect location. And he said, listen, I'm getting ready to leave. You know, if you want, you can have my table.
Perfect.
And that was it. We actually, interestingly enough, which I thought was going to be a detriment, we were directly across a truck, big truck from Vote or Die. Which at the time, if you remember Diddy's slogan at the time, they were starting their initiative earlier than mine, but somewhere at the same time. But they were at Howard Homecoming selling their shirts directly across from where we were selling our shirts.
I see.
But a few hours later, we sold everything.
That's excellent.
Every single shirt sold. And that just made me decide that, you know, I wanted to do something, maybe not in this particular election, but I wanted to not only sell shirts, that wasn't really the reason. I wanted to actually do something that made a change. The shirts or the products that you have merely just spread your word. That's not necessarily what I'm trying to do. I'm actually trying to evoke change.
For sure.
And so we started, you know, a campaign somewhere in 2006, 2007. I got, you know, publicists. I started working with designers. We created press kits. Got a web designer, started creating a website, what have you, and we completely revamped, redesigned the actual original logo. Made about 5 or 6 different ideas of a logo. I live in New York, as I said. We went into Harlem with these 5 different logo suggestions, and we got opinions from people just walking up and down the street until at the end we decided on one particular logo, and that's really how it began.
Right. That's excellent. That's really interesting to see. I think it's really interesting to see one of the tricky moments there was that somebody else was doing similar work or taking a look at a similar work.
And much more popular.
Right. Tough competition there.
Tough competition.
Yeah. So thinking about, you see this movement and you see folks attached to it and you see other folks trying to do similar things, potentially the same thing, which brings up the question, kind of the core of the idea, what is the change we're looking at here? And maybe I think what may be most useful for people is to look at kind of the historical context that we're talking about. So, looking back at history and the present, I suppose my question is, why do you think it is important for us to be looking at this? Why do you think folks are motivated to attach themselves to this idea? And then we can get, a little more specific after that, but kind of big picture.
Yeah, well, I mean, besides that people fought, got beaten and died for our right to vote, it's our civic duty, our constitutional right as American citizens to vote. The I don't know if I had mentioned to you before, but when I started Black Folk Must Vote, we had no idea where the slogan had come from.
I see.
And interestingly enough, did not know until November of last year
I see.
where
Okay.
the actual slogan came from. Had
Okay.
no clue. I researched Zoom, I went to libraries, what have you. I couldn't find any information on that slogan. So I sent the button, the original button, to the African American Museum in DC,
Okay.
and somewhere in November. And within the course of about a month, they explained to me that it's going to take some time for us to decide as to whether we're going to include this button in our archives.
I see.
But in the meantime, here is the story.
Right.
Black
Okay.
Folk Must Vote. And that literally was one of the things that I was looking for.
Mm.
I like the slogan.
Right.
I honestly thought that there was some historical background to it, but I had no proof in it.
Right. What's the connection?
What was the connection?
Mm.
The button was used by by three organizations at the time, three civil rights organizations. Some you'll be familiar with. The Council of Federated Organizations, they call it COFO.
Okay.
SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and CORE, Congress of Racial Equality.
Mm.
And at the time, obviously, although we got the right to vote in 1870, there were barriers to voting at the time, whether it was the jelly bean test that they used to put us through, whether it was the Jim Crow laws, we weren't able to vote. So these three organizations decided to put together a mock election in Mississippi in 1963 to register Black voters at the time, which at the time was very, very difficult to do.
For sure.
And they managed to register 80,000 in Mississippi. 80,000 voters came to register to vote for a mock election.
Mm.
And that election led to what they call Freedom Summer in 1964, which, as you know, the following year, 1965, they signed the Voting Rights Act, 1965. So although the African American Museum did not point to the fact that this was instrumental to that, it played a role.
Right.
It played a role in the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So that is the history of the slogan.
Mm. And so how did, uncovering that connection between now and the past, were there any ways in which that provided you extra motivation or clarified your path going forward, being able to connect yourself with the struggles of the past, being able to see this slogan elsewhere with folks that look like you, look like me, doing similar work, 50, 60, 100 years ago?
Well, I was already motivated.
Mm.
But this did help. It did, because as I mentioned to you in the beginning, I am a student of history. I love history, and especially Black history. And when I found out, where this slogan came from, it actually did put some fire under me, in that whatever it is that I'm doing, I have to live up to what my ancestors did to create this slogan, and to get African Americans to vote. So yeah, it did motivate me considerably.
That's excellent. I mean, I think it's always, like you said, that extra fire to be able to, think of yourself as carrying that torch.
Yes.
I think so
That's
often.
a good way to put it.
Right. It can be easy to be, I think, burdened by the reality of having similar struggles to our ancestors. But I think then also, kind of like you said, there is a certain power in knowing that you are continuing on that legacy, that you are picking off where the ancestors left off. So with that in mind, and thinking about carrying that legacy into the future, which is our present, and then our future going forward. If we're looking at the slogan, right? Black folk must vote. which indicates to us that it's not happening or it's not happening enough. So could you talk a little bit about, what are the present motivations for you? You hit on it a little bit earlier, but kind of what are the present motivations in terms of civic engagement, in terms of Black folks getting out and getting registered and getting voting, that sort of push you to want to do this work? What's happening in the environment that points us in that direction?
Well, I read this maybe about 2 years ago. There was some of the highest voter turnouts for African Americans, which is pretty obvious, was in 2008 and 2012, which obviously was the election of Barack Obama. But in 2016, for whatever reason, I have no clue, 4.4 million Americans, registered Americans, did not vote in 2016. 4.4 million. Shocking to me. And a third of them were Black voters. And that concerned me. When I was doing this, I went into Philadelphia because that's the closest city near me, and it's also what they call a battleground. And I went into Philly to drive people to the polls.
Gotcha.
And several times I've gone to Philly and went to Temple University and spoke with Black Student Union. I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia, spoke to the Black Student Union. And each time I went, I remember one time I was outside of, I was in Philly. I was outside of a cheesesteak place.
Okay.
And I had a gentleman that was with me, my cousin, he was helping me out. And we had cameras and what have you. And we asked this group of about 5, they were anywhere between the ages of 20 and 25. Okay. They were they had gone into the cheesesteak factory. We were waiting outside for our order to be called. And they came out as well and they started talking. And I just asked them, it was election day. And I asked them if they had voted. And I said, would you mind if I put you guys on camera? And they said, no, that's cool. And they explained to me that none of them voted. They said no one in their household voted. And I asked them the reasons why that was. And they explained to me that they all had lived, their families, their friends, under Democratic and Republican administrations. And their lives had not changed one iota from whoever was in office. And their feeling was, what was my motivation to go out and vote?
Right, what good does it do?
What good does it do? And I've heard that argument often. And I think that our elected officials, unfortunately, don't speak to that. They just feel that you just say vote and people will just go out and automatically just vote. It's not even as easy as just voting.
Sure.
It doesn't begin and it doesn't end with just voting. An individual, if they want to see change, they have to be active within their community, whether they, call their elected officials on the phone, whether they, as little as just going to now on social media telling others about when voting is and taking someone with them to the polls. Now you're finding a lot of people going out and actively running for office. You voting, as you can see, is not the end all.
Definitely.
You have to play a role in your democracy in order to see some kind of change. If you're not a part of the solution, then you're a part of the problem. It's going to take more than just going to the poll and voting for someone. You've got to play a role in making change. As you can see, the way that communities are dealing with things right now. I have been fortunate to, I was born into, my mother was a school teacher, my dad was a fireman. And we lived a pretty middle to upper middle class life. When I left home, I started a career rather early at the age of 24, selling precious metals, and that started to grow. So I started to do pretty well at a pretty early age, but it didn't disconnect me from knowing where poor people or disadvantaged people or people who were born in situations that weren't afforded to them, that were afforded to me. And I think our elected officials seem to forget that when they feel that people should automatically just come out and vote for them, and they just don't speak to those communities to understand why they don't vote.
Right. Right.
So anyway,
go ahead.
No, I made a long story long. Make a short story long. I explained to them a really brief, little thing. I told the guys, I said, well, let me just give you a little. I was in your neighborhoods. It was North Philly, and I said, I noticed that, your streets had a lot of potholes in it. It was unpaved. I noticed there was a lot of boards up on a lot of buildings in your neighborhood. I noticed one particular light that was out on a particular corner. At the time, I knew the corner. I don't remember it now. But I said, there's a reason for that. The people who are going to or can change that, can make those changes in those neighborhoods, they won't, because your community doesn't vote. As far as they're concerned, you're blind. I mean, they're blind. They don't know who you are, nor do they care. If you vote, it gives them a reason to want to make change in your community. And that's maybe the best example that I can give how important your vote is, whether it's, it goes as far as the education in your neighborhoods. It goes as far as the prosecutors in your neighborhood. When a police officer shoots an unarmed Black person, and you wonder why those police officers are allowed to go home and have conversations with their bosses about what their excuses are going to be, and no one brings them to task. Those are the prosecutors that you in your midterms vote for. So you've got to realize how important, not just voting for your presidential, but voting in your local elections, how important they really are.
Right, and that's the thing, now that we're kind of like into the work, what is the response to these issues? That is something that I think folks are talking about more. I've had a lot of conversations myself with folks about this idea too of voting is good. Yes, do that for sure. But as you're saying, when we're talking about civic engagement, and we're talking about both your rights and your duties as a citizen of a country and as a community member, it's about the daily too, right? Like you said, it's about the local. It's about all the people that are on that ballot that come up, the community meetings, the council meetings, which can be taxing, and maybe folks. So I guess I'm curious, what would you say? What's your answer to folks to say, that's all well and good, but I don't have time for all that. I hear what you're saying. Maybe that's good for you, but I got A, B, and C to do, A, B, C, D to do on a given day, and I don't have time to go to that meeting, or I just pay attention to the presidential election and that's it. What's kind of your response to that idea?
There's many excuses. There's like too busy, can't get to the polls, don't have a ride to the polls. I don't know the candidates. If I were to vote, nothing's going to change. There are many excuses. I don't know how young people feel when they hear John Lewis speak, and his when he talks about his crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and if they've ever seen video of it. I don't know how much that may affect or not affect young blacks out there. I don't know. I've heard many young people say it's difficult. I don't know how to do it, yet they can stand online for sneakers. They can stand online for concerts. When they tell me it's difficult and I watch them buzz through something on their computer and I have no clue what they're doing because I'm computer illiterate. I just think it takes sitting down, having a conversation with them, talking to them as if they're not just your equals, but your intellectual equals. You just have to have a conversation with them. There's this rapper out who is not getting a lot of publicity, and I'm going to forget his name. Goodness gracious. He has this song out where he starts off. I think he's from New York, and he starts off in his neighborhood talking about the vote, talking about he didn't vote, talking about he doesn't vote. What's his name?
Is it Yellow Pain?
Yellow Pain.
I can't think of the name of the song though.
I forget the name of the
maybe
song.
It's I Don't Vote.
I Don't Vote.
Yeah,
I Don't Vote. Something like that.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It's you're much younger than me, but there was this thing that talked about voting back in my time called Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh yeah, I know about
And
Schoolhouse.
they said a vote on Capitol Hill, and it's a cartoon kind of version, and it really did explain how a vote or a bill becomes a law. And the way that he explained the process of voting and why it's important, not only to your neighborhood but to your community at large, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was really, really fantastic. And if anything, I would love to do a class just on that, just on what he had to say in that one song.
Yeah, that would be really
very well
interesting.
done.
Indeed, I agree.
But I wish I had the magic pill. I just think it takes sitting down, conversation, going into those neighborhoods, going to communities, going to colleges, and talking with them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think so much is taking the time to have conversations with people. Sure.
Can I give one story? Back in 2007, 2008. This is like really the first active time that I actually got to do work. Black Folk Must Vote. Started in 2004, but it really wasn't until 2005, 6, 7 I started this campaign and what have you. And I went to Philadelphia, as I mentioned, and I went to Temple University.
Okay.
And I told you I spoke with students there. Then I went to Philadelphia Art Institute, spoke with students there. 2012, I get a call from a young lady, Nina Bell. Nina Bell, I'm so glad I remember her name. Nina Bell, she was working at an organization called Safe Space in Queens, New York.
Okay.
And Safe Space was a school for at-risk kids.
Gotcha.
I think they had, kids who had been incarcerated. They had LGBT kids. They had, kids who were thrown out because of their choices in life and what have you. So there were kids that were going through some issues. And she said, could you come and speak to my students? I remember you, Temple University, you spoke at my Black Student Union. The Philadelphia Art Institute, same time I spoke with a group of kids. I even actually have the picture on my desk. And I spoke with a group of kids, and several years later, I see this video online, and someone had tagged me. A kid was named Reggie. I forgot his last name. And he had a little YouTube channel called the Doc Report.
Gotcha.
And on the Doc Report, I'm looking at, and I said, I remember this guy. And I'm like, why is Black Folk Must Vote tied to this young man? I didn't remember who he was. And in the Doc Report, he's saying it's from 2008. So we had just left the university, just having that conversation with him and the students. And he starts talking about, this is the first time I ever voted. And this guy named Ken Smaltz from Black Folk Must Vote came and talked to us and told us the importance of our vote and what have you, and it really motivated me to da-da-da-da. These kids, listen, you may not get them all,
right,
but you will get some of them, and all you need to do is just pull a few, and maybe those kids will tell other kids. I mean, this guy created a YouTube channel and he's telling people about voting. Nina Bell is teaching us a class or a school on at-rich kids, and she tells me to come and speak to them about voting. This is how it all happens. You know?
Yeah, no, I think that's, I think it's wonderful. I think, you know, allowing people, you know, giving people the resources and the tools, and kind of stoking that motivation to have the conversation themselves, having as many conversations as we can, you know, and I know that's, you know, specifically a big part of the work you're doing with Black Folk Must Vote. We kind of talked about the T's and the buttons, and different things like that. You know, as we think about these issues, we think about the barriers and the work you're doing. Are there any other things or avenues that you are using to do this work outside of, you know, kind of these conversations and the sort of symbolic stuff that you're trying to spread around the folks?
Well, I'm always looking for partners. And at the beginning of March, this network by the name of Fox Soul, it's a network that's dedicated to, you know, the African-American viewer. All of their programming is based around African-American. And they called me and they said they wanted to partner with me on a voting initiative for 2020.
Okay.
And what their plan was to get celebrities and influencers. You know what I'm sure you know the term influencers. Yeah. All those terms were new to me.
Yeah, honestly, they're still pretty new to me. I'm trying to figure it out too. Yeah.
I'm not an influencer, but I only just joined Instagram in March.
Okay.
Believe it or not. You know, I was more interested in the work, although I probably should have been interested in getting followers and what have you. But you know, that's not the route I took at the time. Unfortunate, I probably should have. But so anyway, Fox Soul and I partnered, and they sent out. What we did is we created a co-branded shirt, Fox Soul BFMV branded tee. They took my slogan, they put it on the front of the shirt. You know, they made it look very something that, you know, millennials or maybe Gen X would be interested in. Actually, interesting enough, it looks hotter than the shirts that I sell on my site. But so they sent out, matter of fact, I have it right here. They sent out, this was the packet that they sent out.
Okay. Yeah, that's dope.
And inside they had little cards.
Okay.
And on the cards, they asked the celebrities to put the shirt on and to use certain hashtags. And if they wanted to do a video and tell people how important it is to vote, tag your friends who are not registered to vote, and have them register to vote on my site. And they managed to get some pretty significant people so far, and there are more as we speak signing on. I have, you know, several names of those who have signed on, but celebrities, I don't want to mention them right now because they could change their minds.
Sure.
No celebrities. But there's at least a dozen or so that just maybe about 4 or 5 days ago have just agreed. They've gotten the email that was sent out. Email says what we'd like you to do. They've sent the email back. Yes, we'll do it. And now the packages go out to them with their size shirt. And they managed to get so far. I don't know if you're familiar with this woman who was just named the chief marketing officer for Netflix, Black woman, Basoma St. John.
Okay.
She wore a shirt, and she posted it on her Instagram.
Cool.
We got Jesse Jackson's daughter, Ashley Jackson, who is the ambassador. So she's really the person who is heading it up.
Gotcha.
Several different people. Now I'm gonna forget all of them. Anyway, there's so far we've got about 40 or so that have signed on, that have already posted, and we have another dozen or so, and several ones that are still actively. And I have other things that I'm actively working on that I can't mention because those deals are not signed yet. I have a deal right now that I'm working on with a major Black magazine that is, we're looking to do a few Zoom conferences where they're going to have some rappers and some people who are very politically motivated on certain Zoom calls talking about the election.
For sure.
And several other things that I'm working on, but once again, they're not written in stone just yet. We're still working on them, and I really can't mention them in fear that they don't come to fruition. So.
Sure. No, that all sounds great. That sounds like some exciting stuff coming up. So looking, as we're looking to the future, you got these new deals coming up, some new designs headed out. Where can people be looking for this stuff? And, how can folks get engaged with you? And then maybe also, what would you suggest for people in the near term? How can they get engaged with their communities?
How can they get it? We're trying to create. We have several people who come to my site, because you could register on my site. You could, if you're interested in finding out, like some young people are, I don't know who's on the ballot. Well, you can go to my site and you could, put in your state, and you'll find out exactly who's on the ballot. If you're not registered, you can register on my site. If you are registered and you're not sure if you are, you can do that on my site as well.
Excellent. And can you say that site name for folks real quick?
blackfolkmustvote.org.
blackfolkmustvote.org. Okay.
Yeah, and we're the voting resources that we use are vote.org.
Okay.
Vote.org. So they have several different, and if you want to, and Ballotpedia, use Ballotpedia.
Okay.
But we are looking to do. We have people who go to my site and they want to play a role in the campaign. I have, I don't know. There have been several people who have come on my site saying they would like to help. So I'm going to pool all of that group of individuals together, and we're going to create the Black Folk Must Vote ambassadors.
Okay.
And we're going to put a program together for those ambassadors, those who are interested in being ambassadors. And, one of the things that we may do is in their particular city, wherever they live, because they're all over the United States. One of the things they might want to do is drive people to the polls.
Yeah.
I did that in Philly. People who are elderly, handicapped, they need assistance. People who don't drive, they need assistance in getting into polls. My dad was in a assisted living facility. Some of them don't have contact with their children, and they want to get to the polls. Sometimes the assisted living facilities, although they're supposed to give them absentee ballots, sometimes they don't. So there's several things that a BFMV ambassador could do, and we're going to put together a program for people who are looking to help in ways that they can.
Excellent. And then I'm assuming that's also where we can find the dope buttons, the tees, and the other information as well.
Yeah. There's a shop page on there where you can get official merchandise. I know things must be going well, because so far I've seen 3 companies on Etsy and Amazon who have been knocking off. You're doing well when someone's knocking you off.
Right. And glad you got that trademark too, right?
Well, I think, because they make a lot of, there's a lot of knockoffs of Black Lives Matter shirts, but they're not trademarked. I am. So they can't do this. So they shut them down immediately. But if you want to get official gear, the only way you can get it is from my site.
Excellent. Well, as we close up here, my mind is kind of drawn to, we do have things on the horizon. So kind of as we wrap up, are there any, first, is there anything I'm missing? Or as we look to the future here, September, October, November, is there anything you think it's particularly important for folks to be thinking about, maybe even more particularly Black folks, as we head into this election season?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how this is going to work. I don't think anyone really knows, but states are going to start making it easier to do absentee and vote by mail. And I think what each person needs to do who's listening, they need to go to vote.org. They can go to my site, and they need to check their states and find out exactly what their states are doing as far as vote by mail. Because what we're going through right now with COVID, there may be some elderly people who may not want to go out to the polls. And this will make it a lot easier for people to get their vote in. And they can get it in, very, very early, depending on, the state. So I think people should start, actively looking to do that, vote by mail.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you for talking to me today. Everyone, again, this is Ken Smaltz, Black Folk Must Vote. I think we would both encourage you to vote when you can, where you can. If you're not registered, get registered. If the homies aren't registered, get them registered. And exercise your civic duty beyond that as well. Engage.
This is an extremely, extremely, extremely important election. It's not a joke. Don't take it as one. You need to vote.
For sure, for sure. And on that note, we'll leave it. Thank you again, Ken. It was
My
good
pleasure.
talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.